Snow fell so thick it erased the pass entirely. Mountain wind howled like the voice of the dead. On every tactical map, this was the point marked impossible, a perfect trap. The entire unit was pinned down, ammunition dwindling with each passing hour, wounded soldiers lying motionless in the freezing drifts. When the commander asked who would volunteer for the mission to clear the pass, not a single hand rose. Then she stepped forward from the curtain of snow. No rank insignia, no identification, just one sniper rifle across her back and a voice cold as the wind itself. "I'll go." The pass had a name once. Now the soldiers just called it the Throat. Lieutenant Connor Hayes crouched behind a shattered supply truck, watching his breath freeze in the air. Around him, what remained of Delta Company huddled in whatever cover they could find. 47 men and women, down from 112 when they'd entered the valley that morning. The mountain walls rose like prison bars on either side, vertical sheets of granite and ice that no human could scale. The pass itself was barely wide enough for 2 vehicles. A natural choke point that should have been scouted, should have been cleared, should have been a lot of things. Enemy fire came from 3 positions. Hayes had counted them in the first hour, before the snow got too thick to see clearly. One heavy machine gun nest built into a cave system on the eastern cliff face, maybe 200 meters up. Impossible to hit from below. One sniper position on the western ridge, elevation advantage so extreme that anyone who moved in the open was dead before they heard the shot. And one mortar team somewhere behind the northern bend, dropping rounds with mechanical precision every 8 minutes. The math was simple, brutal, absolute. Stay here and freeze to death by nightfall. Try to retreat through 3 kilometers of exposed trail and get shredded. Call for air support that couldn't fly in this weather. Or push forward through a kill box that had already claimed 65 lives. Hayes pressed his radio. "Command, Delta Actual," still pinned at the throat, requesting emergency extraction. Static crackled. Then Captain Morris's voice, distant and distorted. "Negative extraction. Weather's getting worse. No birds can fly until this clears." "How long?" 18 hours minimum, maybe more. Hayes looked at his ammunition count, looked at the wounded soldiers wrapped in thermal blankets that wouldn't be enough, looked at the sky where daylight was already fading into the gray murk of a mountain storm. 18 hours was a death sentence. The machine gun opened up again, raking across their position. Rounds punched through metal, sprayed ice chips from the rocks. Someone screamed. Corporal Daniels grabbed the medical kit and crawled toward the sound, keeping low, moving fast. Hayes counted 8 wounded who couldn't walk, maybe a dozen more who could move but wouldn't last long in the cold. The rest were combat effective. But what did that mean when you couldn't see your enemy, and every shot they took came from angles you couldn't return fire to? He pulled out the tactical map, already knowing what it would show. The pass ran north for another kilometer before widening into the valley. That was their objective, the village where the rest of the battalion was waiting. So close. Might as well be on the moon. The mortar team fired again. Hayes heard the whistle, counted 3 seconds, then the crump of impact 40 meters behind their position. They were walking the rounds forward, methodical and patient. Eventually they'd bracket the entire company. Eventually there'd be nowhere to hide. "Sir." Sergeant Park crawled up beside him, her face gray with exhaustion. "We're down to 20 magazines per rifleman. Machine guns almost dry. And we've got 3 men with frostbite bad enough they can't feel their feet." Hayes nodded. He'd been doing the math already. Every scenario ended the same way. "What about a breakout?" Park asked. "Fast and hard, accept the casualties, get whoever we can through. We'd lose 30 people in the first 100 meters. Better than losing everyone." Hayes didn't answer. She was right. She was also wrong. Command had drilled it into them since basic training. Never leave your wounded. Never surrender ground without fighting. Never accept defeat until there were no other options. But when you'd run through every option and they all led to the same place, what then? The radio crackled again. "Delta Actual, command. We're pulling together a solution. Sit tight." Hayes almost laughed. "Sit tight, sure. In negative 20 degrees with enemy fire pouring down and ammunition running out. Just sit tight." Night was coming. The temperature would drop another 15 degrees. The wounded wouldn't last. Even the healthy would start making mistakes, getting slow, losing focus. Combat effectiveness degraded fast in cold like this. Hayes had seen it before, the way hypothermia crept in. First you got clumsy, then you got stupid, then you got dead. He looked up at the cliff faces, at the swirling snow that made the enemy positions invisible. Somewhere up there, people were warm and dry and had unlimited ammunition. They didn't need to attack. They just needed to wait. The throat would do their killing for them. The command post was a shallow cave carved into the southern wall of the pass, barely deep enough to shelter 6 people. Colonel Reeves stood over a map table lit by a single LED lantern, surrounded by officers who looked like they'd aged 10 years in the last 6 hours. "Options," Reeves said. His voice was flat, empty of inflection, the voice of a man who'd already accepted what was coming. Major Klein spoke first. "We can't extract. We can't get artillery support through this weather. We can't flank because the terrain won't allow it. The only path forward is through that kill box, and we don't have the firepower to suppress 3 fortified positions simultaneously. Then we're discussing casualties, not tactics." "Yes, sir." Reeves studied the map. Red marks indicated enemy positions. Blue marks showed Delta Company's current location. The gap between them was less than a kilometer. It might as well have been the Grand Canyon. "What about a small team?" Captain Morris suggested. "Light and fast. Bypass the main route. Come at them from an unexpected angle. Look at the terrain." Klein traced the cliff faces with one finger. Vertical drops on both sides. The only approaches that aren't technical climbs would take 8 hours minimum, and they'd still end up in the same kill box. "So we do nothing." "I didn't say that." Reeves looked up. "What are you saying?" Klein hesitated, then pointed to the western ridge. "The sniper position. That's the linchpin. The machine gun nest has a limited arc of fire. The mortar team can't see their targets directly. But the sniper up here has clear line of sight over the entire pass. He's the spotter, the coordinator. Take him out, and the whole defense starts to fall apart. And how do we take out a sniper who's dug into a mountain? We send another sniper. Someone good enough to make the approach, find a firing position, and make shots that most people would say are impossible." The silence in the cave was absolute. Outside, wind screamed across the rocks. Someone in the group started to speak, then stopped. Finally, Reeves said, "Do we have anyone like that?" "Not in Delta Company. Maybe not in the entire battalion." Klein paused. "But I put out a call to every attached unit within 100 kilometers. Asked if anyone had a specialist who might attempt it. I got one response. From a liaison officer I've never met. He said he might know someone. Said she was unconventional." Klein nodded. "No rank listed, no unit designation. Just a name that showed up in the system about 6 hours ago. I ran it through intelligence. Got back a file that was mostly redacted." Reeves felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What kind of file?" "The kind that has a kill count instead of a service record. The kind that makes intelligence officers stop asking questions." "Is she here?" "Arrived 20 minutes ago. She's outside." Reeves looked at the map one more time, at the red mark on the ridge, at the blue marks that represented 47 lives slowly freezing to death. Then he walked to the cave entrance and stepped into the snow. She was standing 10 meters away, barely visible through the storm. Medium height, winter camouflage that looked like it had seen a dozen campaigns, a rifle case slung across her back. No insignia, no name tape, nothing that would identify her as military except the way she stood, perfectly still, conserving energy. Reeves approached. She didn't salute, didn't speak, just watched him with eyes that were pale gray, almost the same color as the snow. "Colonel Reeves," he said, "I know who you are." Her voice was quiet, controlled, not hostile, just economical. Every word chosen for function, not courtesy. "You understand the situation? Can you do it?" She turned and looked up at the ridge, at the swirling snow, and the vertical cliff face, and the impossible distance. For 10 seconds she didn't move, didn't blink, just calculated angles and distances that Reeves couldn't even see. Then she said, "Yes." "When can you start?" "You'll need support. A spotter. Extraction plan." "No." She adjusted the rifle case on her back. "I go alone. If I succeed, you'll know because the fire will stop. If I fail, send Delta forward anyway. It's their only chance either way." "What's your name?" For the first time, something almost like a smile crossed her face. "Does it matter?" Reeves wanted to say yes. Wanted to say that everyone deserved a name, deserved recognition, deserved to be remembered if they died on a mountainside in a snowstorm. But he looked into those gray eyes and understood that she'd stopped caring about things like that a long time ago. "No," he said. "I suppose it doesn't." She nodded once, then turned and walked into the storm. Reeves stood there, watching her disappear into the white. Klein came up beside him, breathing hard from the altitude. "Think she can do it?" Klein asked. "I think," Reeves said slowly, "that we just sent a ghost to kill a ghost." "What does that mean?" "It means we're about to find out if legends are real." The file sat on Klein's tablet, glowing in the dim light of the command cave. He'd read it 3 times already, trying to make sense of the gaps, the redactions, the things that weren't said. Name: redacted. Unit assignment: redacted. Service record: redacted. Confirmed kills: redacted note. Number exceeds typical career totals by significant margin. Recommend verification before inclusion in official documentation. Deployment history: multiple theaters. Specific locations classified above clearance level. Commendations: redacted. The only concrete information was a note at the bottom, added by someone in intelligence. Subject is authorized for autonomous operations at command discretion. No support required. No extraction guaranteed. Mission success rate approaches statistical improbability. Recommend full cooperation if she volunteers. Do not attempt to give orders. She doesn't follow them anyway. Klein looked up at Captain Morris. You ever heard of anything like this? Morris shook his head. Black Ops, maybe? Special Activities Division? They don't usually send one person to do a battalion's job. Maybe that's exactly what they do. We just never hear about it. Klein scrolled to the end of the file, where someone had attached a series of incident reports. Heavily redacted, but the pattern was clear. Urban warfare in the Middle East. A high-value target eliminated from 2 kilometers in a sandstorm. Mountain operations in Afghanistan. An entire Taliban command structure neutralized in 48 hours by what witnesses described as a devil with a rifle. Anti-insurgency operations in Africa. 6 confirmed kills in a single night. Each one a shot that ballistics experts later said should have been impossible given the conditions. And then nothing. The report stopped 3 years ago, as if she'd simply vanished. Why now? Morris asked. Why come back for this? Maybe she never left. Maybe she's always out there, waiting for the mission that needs her. That's a hell of a way to live. Klein thought about the woman standing in the snow, about the way she'd looked at the mountain like it was just another obstacle, another problem with a ballistic solution, about the absolute lack of fear in her eyes. I don't think, Klein said quietly, that she lives the way we do at all. Outside, in the howling dark, she moved. The approach would take hours. The terrain was worse than the map suggested, always was. Frozen rock, hidden crevasses, wind that could knock you off a cliff if you weren't careful. She'd done climbs like this before, in worse conditions, carrying heavier loads. The muscle memory was still there, the body still remembered. She checked her equipment one more time. Rifle, custom-built, chambered for, 338 Lapua Magnum, effective range 2,000 meters in good conditions. These were not good conditions. Ammunition, 40 rounds, hand-loaded, verified for consistency. Scope, thermal capable, but the cold would drain the battery fast. She'd have to rely on optical magnification for most shots. Clothing, layered for warmth but not bulk. Nothing that would snag or rustle or give away her position. Everything she needed, nothing she didn't. The wind pushed against her as she started up the slope. Snow had drifted deep in places, up to her waist. She moved through it like water, finding the path of least resistance, conserving strength. The temperature was still dropping. Her breath came out in clouds that froze before they dissipated. Exposed skin would get frostbite in minutes. She kept her face covered, breathing through fabric, letting her body heat warm the air before it reached her lungs. Time became meaningless. There was only the next handhold, the next step, the rhythm of movement and the calculations running constantly in her mind. Wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure, all the variables that would affect a bullet's flight path, all the factors that most snipers spent years learning to read. She'd learned them in blood. An hour passed. Then 2. The slope got steeper. She used climbing techniques, finding purchase in cracks, testing each grip before committing her weight. Below, the pass had disappeared entirely into the storm. Above, the ridge was still invisible. She was alone in a world of white and gray and howling wind, exactly where she needed to be. Sergeant Park checked her watch for the 100th time. 3 hours since the woman had left. No communication, no signal, just the same killing fire from above, the same slow attrition of ammunition and body heat and hope. You think she's real? Corporal Daniels asked. He was crouched beside Park, sharing the minimal shelter of an overturned vehicle, or just something command made up to keep us from giving up. Does it matter? Yeah, it does. Because if she's real, and she fails, we're still dead. But if she's not real, we've been sitting here waiting for a miracle that was never coming. Park didn't answer. She was thinking about the woman's eyes, about the way she'd looked at the mountain, like it was already dead and just didn't know it yet. "She's real," Park said finally. "Whatever she is, she's real." The machine gun opened up again, a long burst that stitched across the rocks. Someone cursed. Lieutenant Hayes shouted for everyone to stay down. The mortar team fired, and Park counted the seconds, waiting for the impact that was getting closer every time. Real or not, they were running out of time. At 3 hours, she reached the first plateau, a small shelf of rock jutting from the cliff face, barely wide enough for her to lie flat. She stopped there, catching her breath, letting her heart rate return to normal. Rest was tactical. Push too hard and you made mistakes. Make mistakes at this altitude in this cold and you died quietly, alone, forgotten. The storm was getting worse. Wind speeds had increased to the point where standing was dangerous. She stayed low, crawled to the edge of the plateau, and looked down. Nothing but white. The pass was gone. Delta Company was gone. Even the sound of gunfire was muffled by the wind, reduced to distant pops that might have been her imagination. Good. If she couldn't see them, they couldn't see her. She checked her hands. The right one was starting to lose feeling in the fingertips. Early stages of frostbite. She flexed her fingers inside her glove, forcing blood flow, ignoring the pain. Pain was just information. It told you something was wrong. It didn't tell you to stop. The climb got technical after the plateau. Near vertical sections that required actual equipment. She pulled out her ice axes, set up a minimal safety line, and started up. Each movement was calculated, tested, verified. You didn't rush technical climbing. You did it right, or you fell. Halfway up the next section, her foot slipped. For 2 seconds, she hung by one arm, ice axe dug into frozen rock, legs swinging over a drop that disappeared into clouds. Most people would have panicked. She just reset, found a new foothold, continued climbing. Fear was optional. Falling was physics. She dealt in physics. Another hour. Another 100 vertical meters. The wind was screaming now, sustained gusts that hit like fists. Twice she had to stop and anchor herself, waiting for the worst of it to pass. You couldn't fight wind like this. You accepted it, worked around it, found the brief windows when it was survivable. At 5 hours, she reached the secondary ridge. Not her final position, but close. She could see the enemy snipers hide from here, a darker shadow against the snow-covered rocks. Maybe 400 meters away, elevated another 50 meters. Dug in, protected, commanding perfect angles over the pass below. He would be warm, would have supplies, would be confident that no one could touch him from this range in this weather. He was wrong. She settled into a crevice between 2 rocks, out of the wind, and began her preparation. This was the part most people didn't understand about sniping. The shooting was maybe 5% of the job. Everything else was this: waiting, calculating, reading the environment, becoming part of the landscape. The rifle came out of its case. She assembled it by touch, not looking, fingers finding each component through muscle memory built over thousands of repetitions. Stock to receiver, barrel locked, scope mounted, bolt action smooth despite the cold. Some rifles got temperamental in extreme conditions. This one had been built for them. She loaded 5 rounds into the magazine. Not 40, not 20, 5. Because 5 was all she would need, and excess ammunition was just weight. The scope showed her the world in shades of green and gray. Thermal imaging was useless. The cold had equalized everything. But optical magnification still worked. She could see the enemy position, could see the barrel of his rifle protruding from the hide, could see the slight disturbance in the air that meant someone was generating body heat behind those rocks. Range: 418 meters. Wind: gusting 30 to 40 kilometers per hour from the northwest. Temperature: -23 Celsius. Barometric pressure: dropping. Humidity: 90%. She pulled out a small notebook, made calculations longhand. Most modern snipers used ballistic computers. She preferred math. Computers could fail. Math was forever. The numbers told her the shot was possible. Barely. The margin for error was measured in centimeters at this range. A gust of wind at the wrong moment would push the bullet wide. A shift in her breathing would throw off the aim. The cold would affect the powder burn rate, would change the bullet's velocity, would introduce variables that even the best calculations couldn't fully account for. Possible didn't mean probable. She settled in to wait. The shot would come when the shot came. Force it and you missed. Accept it and the mountain would give you your moment. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the scope, the wind, the tiny movements of the target. Hours might have passed. Minutes. The cold crept in. settling into bones, making muscles stiff. She ignored it. Discomfort was just noise. Then the wind dropped. For 10 seconds, maybe 15, the air went still. The snow stopped driving horizontally and fell straight down. The world held its breath. She breathed in. Half a breath. Let it out slowly. Paused at the natural respiratory pause where the body is most still. The target shifted. Just slightly. Just enough to present a clean angle. Her finger touched the trigger. Not pulled. Touched. The rifle would fire itself when the moment was perfect. And then it was. The rifle spoke. One word. One syllable. A statement of physics delivered at 853 meters per second. The 338 Lapua round covered 418 meters in just over half a second. In that time, the Earth rotated imperceptibly. The wind, calm for a moment, began to build again. Temperature differentials created pressure waves invisible to the naked eye. The bullet passed through them all, spinning at 3,000 revolutions per second, stabilized by the rifling, dropping according to ballistic tables that she'd memorized years ago. Through the scope, she watched. The round entered the enemy sniper's position at a downward angle, punched through the fabric of his shelter, and found its target with the precision of surgical steel. The thermal signature behind the rocks changed, went still. She worked the bolt, smooth and mechanical, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a new round in one fluid motion. The empty brass tumbled away into the snow, already forgotten. Evidence didn't matter when there was no one alive to find it. 4 rounds left. She shifted her aim to the second position, the machine gun nest carved into the eastern cliff. Different range, different angle, different environmental factors. The math changed completely. Range, 612 meters. Elevation difference, 43 meters. Wind, back up to 30 kilometers per hour, quartering from her right. The machine gun crew would be protected by the cave structure. She couldn't see them. But she could see the barrel of the weapon, could see the muzzle flash when they fired. Wait. The machine gun opened up, raking across Delta Company's position below. Long burst. 10 seconds. 15. Disciplined fire from someone who knew their weapon. The muzzle flash illuminated the cave entrance, gave her a split second of visual data. 2 operators. One on the gun, one feeding the belt. Both protected by rock walls that would stop any round she could fire. But the gun itself was exposed. She calculated. The machine gun was mounted on a heavy tripod, anchored to the cave floor. If she could disable the weapon, the operators became irrelevant. They couldn't fire what was broken. The next burst came. She was ready. The round left her rifle, tracking through the storm, dropping according to gravity's patient math. It hit the machine gun's receiver group at an angle, smashed through the feed tray mechanism, and turned precision machinery into scrap metal. The firing stopped. Silence from the cave. Then shouting. Distant and muffled, but angry. The operators had just realized they were out of the fight. 3 rounds left. She swept her scope across the battlefield, reading it like a book written in violence and geometry. The mortar team was still firing, but blind now. Their spotter was dead. Their coordinated defense had become chaos. Delta Company would be confused too. The machine gun had stopped. The sniper hadn't fired in minutes. They wouldn't know what had happened, only that the killing had paused. She could imagine Lieutenant Hayes on his radio, demanding to know what was happening, getting no answers because no one had answers to give. Time to give them something concrete. The mortar team was the problem now. She couldn't see them directly. They were behind the northern bend of the pass, protected by terrain. But mortars worked on mathematics just like rifles did. Angle of fire, time of flight, impact pattern. She'd been counting the rounds, timing them, building a picture of where they must be positioned. Indirect fire required indirect solutions. She shifted position, moving 30 meters along the ridge to get a different angle. The movement was slow, careful, staying low. Even with the sniper dead, there could be other observers. Complacency killed. From the new position, she could see the northern bend. Couldn't see the mortar team itself, but could see a section of rock wall they were using for cover. More importantly, she could see a boulder perched on the cliff face above them. Unstable, held in place by ice and friction and luck. Physics was patient. But physics was also absolute. She aimed at the ice supporting the boulder. Not at the boulder itself. That would take multiple shots she couldn't spare. At the ice. At the weak point, she could see even through the scope's magnification. The round hit, shattered the ice, and gravity did the rest. The boulder fell. Tons of rock and frozen earth, accelerating down the cliff face, building momentum. It hit the ledge where the mortar team was positioned and kept going, taking half the cliff with it. The mortars went silent. 2 rounds left. She scanned the battlefield one more time. 3 enemy positions neutralized. Not eliminated, the cave operators were still alive, and there might be survivors from the mortar team, but combat ineffective. The pass was open. Time to leave. She began breaking down the rifle, moving fast now. The shooting was done, but the mission wasn't over until she was clear. Enemy reinforcements would be coming. They'd want to know what happened, want revenge, want to find whoever had just destroyed their positions. They wouldn't find her. She was already gone. Lieutenant Hayes didn't believe it at first. The machine gun had been firing every few minutes for 6 hours. Constant, reliable, the rhythm of their slow death. And then it just stopped. Not suppressed, not paused. Stopped. Cease fire, he ordered. Everyone hold position. The silence was unnatural. Wrong. After hours of noise, the absence of it was louder than the gunfire had been. Could be a trick, Sergeant Park said. Get us to move, then hit us hard. Could be, but Hayes didn't think so. Something had changed. The entire character of the battle had shifted in the last 15 minutes. First, the sniper went quiet, then the machine gun died, then the mortars. He looked up at the northern cliff face just as the avalanche hit. Watched tons of rock and ice cascade down onto the enemy position. A disaster so perfectly timed it couldn't be natural. Jesus, someone whispered. Hayes grabbed his radio. Command, Delta Actual. Enemy fire has ceased. I say again, all enemy positions are silent. Static. Then Colonel Reeves's voice, sharp with disbelief. Confirm, Delta. All positions? Confirmed. Sniper's gone dark. Machine gun is offline. Mortar team just got buried by an avalanche. I don't know what happened, but the pass is clear. Hold your position. We're sending a scout element forward. Negative, sir. We have wounded who need immediate evacuation, and we're almost out of ammunition. If the pass is clear, we're moving now. A pause. Then, understood. Proceed with caution. We'll have medics waiting at the rally point. Hayes turned to his company. 47 faces, frost-covered and exhausted, looking at him with the careful hope of people who'd stopped believing in miracles. We're moving out, he said. Stay alert, stay together. Anyone who can walk helps someone who can't. We've lost enough people today. They moved through the pass like ghosts, weapons ready, expecting the trap to spring shut at any moment. But the only sound was wind, and their own breathing, and the crunch of boots on frozen snow. Hayes paused at the point where the machine gun had been firing from. The cave entrance was dark, empty. He could see the weapon inside, the receiver smashed beyond repair. A single shot, perfect placement, the kind of shooting that shouldn't be possible at this range in these conditions. Sir. Corporal Daniels was at the entrance, looking at something on the ground. You need to see this. Hayes climbed up. There were 2 enemy soldiers in the cave, alive but in shock, hands raised. They weren't even armed anymore, just sitting there, surrounded by ruined equipment, looking like men who'd seen something they couldn't explain. One of them started speaking rapidly in accented English. We surrender. We surrender. Please. The ghost. We saw the ghost in the mountain. What ghost? The sniper. Petrov. Best in our unit. Never missed. And then, he made a gesture like an explosion. One shot. From nowhere. And he's gone. And then the gun. And then the rocks falling. And, he kept talking, but Hayes had stopped listening. He was looking up at the ridge, at the swirling snow, trying to imagine the angles, the distances, the perfect sequence of shots that had taken apart a fortified position from somewhere invisible. One woman, one rifle, one impossible mission. He keyed his radio. Command, Delta Actual. Pass is clear. Enemy positions neutralized. Minimal friendly casualties in the advance. We're coming home. She was 200 meters from the ridge when she heard them coming. 3 men, maybe 4, moving fast but not carefully enough. They'd found the dead sniper, had traced the shot angle back, had figured out roughly where she'd been positioned. Now they were coming for revenge. Stupid, but predictable. She had 2 rounds left. Enough if she was precise, not enough if she wasted them. The terrain here was broken, full of crevices and wind-carved formations, good for defense. She found a position between 2 vertical slabs of rock, a natural corridor that funneled any approach into a kill zone. Then she waited. They came into view 3 minutes later. 4 men in winter camouflage, carrying AK pattern rifles, moving in a tactical spread. Professional, disciplined, not the conscripts who'd been manning the machine gun. These were hunters. The lead man was scanning the ridge with binoculars, looking for tracks, for disturbances in the snow, for anything that would indicate her position. He was good. In another 30 seconds, he'd spot the slight depression in the snow where she'd set up her original shooting position. She shot him first. The round took him in the chest, punched through body armor that might have stopped a rifle round at longer range but was useless at this distance. He went down without a sound, just a brief spray of red against white snow. One round left. The other three scattered immediately, dropping into cover, returning fire blindly. Rounds cracked against rock, sprayed ice chips into the air. Undisciplined panic fire. They didn't know where she was, were just shooting at where they thought she might be. Amateur hour. She waited. Let them waste ammunition. Let them expose their positions. Combat was as much about patience as it was about violence. One of them moved. Quick sprint from one rock to another, trying to flank. She tracked him through the scope, watched him slide into cover, watched him set up for his next move. When he broke cover again, she was ready. The last round dropped him mid-stride. He fell, rolled, didn't get up. 0 rounds left. 2 enemies remaining. And she was out of ammunition. Time to switch tactics. She broke down the rifle, stowed it in its case, and pulled out her sidearm. A .45 caliber pistol. Not ideal for this range, but better than nothing. Then she started moving, staying low, using the terrain. The remaining 2 men had gone quiet. Smart. They knew they'd lost 2 friends in the last minute, knew they were dealing with someone who didn't miss. Fear was setting in. Fear made people cautious, or it made them desperate. She heard movement to her left. Too loud. One of them was trying to close the distance, was abandoning stealth for speed. She let him come, tracked his progress by sound, waited until he was 15 meters away. Then she stepped out and put 3 rounds center mass. He dropped. 1 left. The last man was either very brave or very stupid. She heard him approaching from the right, heard the crunch of boots on snow, the ragged breathing of someone pushing too hard at this altitude. He came around the corner fast, rifle up, ready to shoot anything that moved. She wasn't there. She was 5 meters behind him, had circled back while he was focused on the position she'd just left. The pistol was already aimed at the base of his skull. "Drop it," she said in his language. He froze. The rifle wavered. She could see his mind working, calculating odds, trying to decide if he was fast enough to turn and fire before she could pull the trigger. He wasn't. The rifle fell into the snow. "How many more are coming?" she asked. "No more. We were the only ones who saw Petrov die. The others don't know yet. They'll know soon. Please, I have a family, a daughter." She shot him in the leg. Not fatal, but incapacitating. He went down screaming, clutching the wound. "You'll live, if you're smart," she said. "Stay here. Don't follow me. When they find you, tell them the mountain takes payment from everyone." She turned and walked away, leaving him in the snow. Behind her, his screams faded into the wind. The sun was setting when Delta Company reached the rally point. What should have been a 5-hour march had taken 12. The wounded were barely conscious, the healthy were stumbling, but they were alive. Colonel Reeves met them personally, standing in the falling snow, watching his soldiers emerge from the pass one by one. Hayes saluted, too tired to make it crisp. "Casualty report?" Reeves asked. 8 Kia, 14 wounded, 3 critical. The rest are ambulatory but combat ineffective for at least 48 hours. Reeves did the math. Out of 112 soldiers, they'd lost 8. In a kill box that should have annihilated them completely, they'd lost 8. "The woman?" he asked. "No sign of her, sir. No communication, no sighting. We found evidence of her positions on the ridge, spent brass, disturbances in the snow, but she was gone before we got there." "Did anyone see her? Anyone at all?" Hayes thought about the enemy soldiers in the cave, their terrified babbling about ghosts, about the impossible angles of fire, about the perfect sequence of shots that had dismantled a fortress. "No, sir," he said. "No one saw her." Reeves looked up at the mountain, at the pass that had nearly killed them all, at the ridge where one woman with one rifle had changed everything. "Good," he said quietly. "Let her stay invisible. Some legends work better that way." The search teams went out at first light. 3 squads, experienced trackers, equipped with everything they needed to find one person in a mountain range. They found nothing. Tracks that led nowhere. Brass casings from positions that shouldn't have been reachable. Evidence of a firefight where 4 men had died and 1 had been left alive with a leg wound. Babbling about a woman who moved like smoke. But no woman. Major Klein coordinated the search from the command post, growing more frustrated with each negative report. She had to be somewhere. People didn't just vanish. Not in terrain this isolated. Not with satellites tracking and thermal imaging scanning and every possible exit route monitored. Maybe she went to ground, Captain Morris suggested. Found a cave, waiting for extraction. We've checked every cave within 10 kilometers. She's not there. Then maybe she didn't survive. Maybe the cold got her after the firefight. Klein didn't believe that. Couldn't believe it. Everything about that woman had suggested someone who'd survived worse, who'd made a career out of impossible situations. The file sat on his tablet, still mostly redacted, still offering no answers. He scrolled to the intelligence note at the bottom, read it again. Do not attempt to give orders. She doesn't follow them anyway. Did that extend to extraction? Had she simply decided that the mission was over and left on her own terms through routes they didn't know existed? Or had she never planned to come back at all? Sir. A lieutenant entered the command post, looking uncomfortable. We found something. What? A message, carved into a rock face at her primary firing position. Just 2 words. What words? Mission complete. Klein stared at him. That's it? Nothing else? Nothing else. Clean letters, carved deep, probably done with a knife. And sir, the rock face where she carved it? It's a 70-degree overhang. She would have had to hang from a rope one-handed to reach it. Of course she would. Klein dismissed the lieutenant and sat there, looking at the file that wasn't a file, thinking about the woman who wasn't exactly a woman, at least not in any conventional sense. She'd come when called, accomplished the impossible, and disappeared like she'd never existed. Exactly what the intelligence note had said she would do. He closed the file, encrypted it, sent it back to whatever black hole it had come from. Some questions didn't need answers. 5 years later, Lieutenant Hayes, now Captain Hayes, found himself in a military briefing room, lecturing a group of new officers on mountain warfare tactics. The throat operation, he said, pulling up a map on the screen. By all conventional analysis, Delta Company should have been annihilated. 3 fortified positions, superior elevation, unlimited ammunition. We were pinned down with no air support, no artillery, and diminishing combat effectiveness due to exposure. A young lieutenant raised her hand. The after-action report says a specialist neutralized the enemy positions, but there's no name attached, no unit designation, just specialist. Hayes smiled. He got this question every time he gave this lecture. That's correct, he said. Who was she? Classified. How did she do it? Physics and patience. The same tools available to any sniper, just applied with perfect precision. But sir, the angles of fire, the ranges, the weather conditions, ballistics experts say some of those shots shouldn't have been possible. Hayes looked at the map, at the red marks indicating enemy positions, at the blue marks showing where Delta Company had been dying by degrees. Shouldn't have been possible is different from impossible, he said. The specialist understood that. She also understood that sometimes one person in the right place with the right tools can change the outcome of an entire battle. Is she still active? Can we request her for operations? I don't know if she's active. I don't know if you can request her. What I know is that when the situation was impossible and no one else would volunteer, she did, and she succeeded. The briefing ended. The officers filed out, still talking about the mysterious specialist, constructing their own theories. Hayes let them. Speculation was better than truth sometimes. Truth was classified. Speculation was motivational. He was packing up his materials when he noticed an envelope on the podium. Plain white paper, no markings. He picked it up, looked around. The room was empty. Inside was a single photograph, black and white. A mountain pass, snow-covered, taken from a high elevation. The throat, from an angle he'd never seen before. The angle only one person could have taken. No signature, no message, just the photograph. Hayes held it for a long moment, then slipped it into his folder. Some messages didn't need words. She was still out there, still doing the impossible, still volunteering when no one else would, still a legend living in the storm. 10 years after the throat operation, in a military archive buried 3 levels below the Pentagon, a records specialist named Sarah Chen was digitizing old mission reports when she found something odd. The Delta Company file was heavily redacted, normal for black operations, but what caught her attention was a sub-file attached to it, encrypted with a cipher she'd never seen before. It took her 3 days to crack it. Inside was a single document, not a mission report, not a personnel file, just a list of dates and locations. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, 2019. Al-Anbar, Iraq, 2020. Kivu, Democratic Republic of Congo, 2021. Sinaloa, Mexico 2023. Donbass, Ukraine, 2024. And on. 47 entries in total, different countries, different operations, different impossible situations, and attached to each one, the same two-word note: mission complete. Sarah printed the list, stared at it, tried to find the pattern. The operations had nothing obvious in common: different terrain, different enemies, different strategic objectives. Some were military operations, some were counterterrorism, some were humanitarian interventions that had gone sideways. The only common thread was that all of them, according to the original mission assessments, had been classified as extremely high risk, or probability of success, low. And all of them had succeeded. She ran the dates against known special operations deployments. No match. Ran the locations against CIA asset movements. No match. Ran everything against every database she had access to. Nothing. It was as if one person, one specialist, had been operating completely off the books for a decade, appearing exactly when needed, succeeding where others failed, and vanishing without claiming credit. Sarah encrypted the list again, filed it away, and tried to forget about it. But she couldn't stop thinking about those two words. Mission complete. Not objective achieved, not target eliminated, not any of the formal military terminology that littered official reports. Just simple, direct, unemotional. The words of someone who volunteered for the impossible, succeeded, and moved on to the next impossibility. Sarah found herself hoping, in an abstract way, that whoever this specialist was, she was somewhere warm right now, somewhere far from mountains and snow and people shooting at her. But she suspected that wasn't true. The specialist was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Volunteering for the impossible. One rifle, one mission, one legend that would never need a name. In a small cabin in the Rockies, a woman sat cleaning a rifle. The cabin was isolated, off-grid, accessible only by a trail that didn't appear on any maps. The rifle was familiar, worn but immaculate, the tool of someone who understood that reliability was more important than appearance. Snow fell outside. A storm was building. Radio chatter from a military frequency played softly in the background, not because she was monitoring it officially, but because old habits died hard. The chatter mentioned a hostage situation. High altitude, mountain terrain, multiple assets pinned down, no clear solution. She stopped cleaning the rifle. Listened. The commander was asking for volunteers. No one was responding. The situation was too difficult, too dangerous, too likely to result in casualties. Impossible, they were saying. She looked at the window, at the falling snow, at the mountains that had been her home and her battlefield for so many years. Then she started packing. Some people were built for impossible missions. Some people volunteered when no one else would. Some people understood that one rifle in the right hands could change everything. She was those people. Always had been. Always would be. The storm outside intensified. She finished packing, shouldered her rifle, and walked out into the white. Somewhere, a mission was waiting. And she never said no to missions that needed her. Never. In the official records, she doesn't exist. No name, no rank, no service number, no paper trail that could connect the dots. In the unofficial records, the ones that soldiers tell each other in quiet moments, she has 100 names. The Ghost, the Mountain, the Last Volunteer. Names that describe what she does, not who she is. In the hearts of people who've been saved by impossible shots from invisible positions, she has no name at all. Just gratitude that borders on reverence. And in the high places of the world, in the mountains where the air is thin and the cold can kill, there's a story that gets told when conditions are bad and missions are worse. They say there's a woman who goes where others can't, who volunteers for the missions that have no chance, who takes her rifle and her skill and her absolute refusal to accept defeat into places where defeat is the only logical outcome. They say she's been doing it for decades, that she's saved hundreds of lives, that she's changed the course of battles that should have been losses. They say she only appears when the situation is truly impossible, and they say she always succeeds. Is it true? All of it? Parts of it? None of it? Does it matter? Legends serve a purpose. They remind us that sometimes, when everything is impossible, one person can still make a difference. One volunteer, one rifle, one absolutely perfect shot. And somewhere in the mountains, where snow falls and wind howls and the impossible waits to be